We talk a lot about lean marketing framework. That's a trademark process that we have put together. And I wanted to go back and tell a little bit more of the story of how we arrived at the lean marketing framework in the first place. I think it's about 23 years ago now. I started a web development agency in my parents' attic. And I just graduated college and realized that nobody was hiring. I set off on my own. And I had been, as a kid, putting together and building computers and putting together computer networks and building websites, and just finished school realizing I had to pick something to do. And I had already had clients just from putting myself through school. I decided to start something on my own. I watched the evolution of the internet take place. We had flash websites that had skip intro buttons, and it starts to feel old. The kids these days don't even know what we're talking about. But what ended up happening is I watched every iteration of digital marketing and the evolution of the internet. And shockingly, it's very similar to what's happening right now with AI. What happens is a new feature gets introduced, a new algorithm, a new way of thinking gets introduced, buyer behavior starts to pick up. And as business owners, we just chase one shiny object after another. It started with, hey, we need a website, but we have no clue what it does. And we need this Facebook business page, and we have no clue what it does. And we invest a bunch of time and energy into building this thing out. And then Facebook comes out and rips all of that custom coding out and says, you have to use this standard stock template. Google Ads comes out, marketing automation comes out. All of these sorts of things pick up, and we get stuck into chasing what everybody else is telling us to do. It's today, we were just having this conversation. We're going back and reorienting all of the things that we have been doing around SEO to be now focused on AI visibility. And no one really knows the specific algorithm of how it works. And 2 months ago, this worked. And then this month, this doesn't work. Then there was this really big shift around agencies. It became this pricing model conversation over how do you value the work that you're doing? And so there's the time-based model. How much time are we putting into this? And then there's the profitability model. How much value are we adding to this organization? And so there was this big shift to move into this thing called value-based pricing. If you're going to generate growth for an organization, how do you properly evaluate that growth? How do you properly value that growth so that you're being fair, or you're capturing some measure of that growth that's appropriate for that business owner, and hopefully you can share in the upside. And what I realized in having a lot of those conversations, we've tried all of those things, everything from hourly models to fixed pricing models to value-driven pricing, and playing with all of that. We realized that there was an unintentional lie that was being told by the business owner or the marketing leader or the sales leader. And sometimes it was just naivete. They didn't know the answer. And sometimes they had just lied to themselves. If I just got 5 leads, we would be done. And so we started to step into a lot of these engagements, realizing we can't just step into value-based pricing without understanding and clarifying value for the organization. And so that became the genesis of the lean marketing framework. As we were stepping in as an external partner, the first thing that we knew we had to figure out was, what is the core business model and how do we communicate it to that unique audience that they're trying to reach? And so we started developing structure around that. And that became Sprint 1, this discovery process as we go through and help the organization land on its positioning. We built this specific product or service for this specific group of people. And we have to be able to tell that in a very compelling way so that they're willing to pay a premium over the rest of the competitors in the market that says, we built this specifically for you. You should actually care more about it. And what was interesting about that process is we started to develop things like the DC3 model for brand messaging. I had to not just teach it to our clients, I had to teach it to our own team. Because intuitively I got it and I started landing at some magic. But you really begin to understand a process like this when you have to teach it to others. And the first stage of this is really about about organizational positioning. Who do we serve? What's our specific business model design? How do we communicate that to a specific narrow audience that gets it? And there was everything from goal setting involved in there, desired future state conversations, brand positioning, target audience modeling, personas, all of the things that went into that. The foundational elements of ABM marketing, account-based marketing, all fit into that. But we used a core exercise, our brand messaging process, as a way of synthesizing and clarifying all of that positioning. One of the tenets of that is to make sure, I'll just give you the DC3 model. We wanted a framework for this that was easy to understand. And the framework for brand messaging was, is it differentiated? That's the D. Is it clear? Is it compelling? And is it customer centric? And we would evaluate what they needed to say so that they actually were unique. And oftentimes we would have clients coming to us and they were losing deals based on price. Their competitors were basically undercutting them on price. And once again, price is a differentiator. It's just the weakest differentiator. Anybody can undercut you tomorrow. And what we were trying to do is to help pull out uniqueness out of these organizations that we were serving to give them something that was far more meaty, far more tangible that they could stand on in a proposal, in an RFP, that removed the just even commodity comparisons. Part of that, the differentiation model, is what inspired this next sprint, which we called the validate sprint. If we're going to say that we're different, if we're going to say that we're compelling, we actually have to go out and map who the rest of the viable alternatives are in the marketplace. And so our market analysis process wasn't just a SWOT analysis or competitive analysis as many other agencies or what you would learn in a college marketing class. The market analysis really informed us on what are other people saying, what digital tools or marketing tools are they doing, where do they go to market. This placement part of marketing, if you think of the 4 Ps of marketing, where is this being sold? We really needed to understand that from a tactical perspective. And we would get really geeky with it. What tracking pixels are on their site? What advertising platforms are they on? What is their brand messaging and how do we stand out? How does that evaluate to ours? What does their website look like? What do their social profiles look like? We would do this really deep dive into what their go-to-market strategy was. We still do this today. We do this all the time. It's the foundation of all of our client engagements. This next stage of market analysis, we think that organizations should refresh this every year. We've had organizations where we've done really big, deep foundational work with, and then we go and we roll that out into their websites and their social profiles and their sales decks and all of these sorts of things. We go to refresh the next year and we look at the analysis, we realize that their competitors have literally ripped off all of their differentiation. They've copied their same value statements. They've come and said, yeah, me too. And what do you do about that? Part of this is to go back through and do that foundational work and say, hey, if they can say me too to these things, how do I stand out again? And this is work that needs to be done over and over again to provide meaningful distinction and differentiation in the marketplace. That's sprint 2, as we would talk through with lean marketing frameworks. How do we do our marketing analysis? And then that third stage, I realized, as we're talking about value and how I bring leads, I realized that leads is the most dangerous word in any organization. Everybody defines them dramatically differently. The sales team wants to define lead as somebody that's ready to buy tomorrow. In many organizations, we even start having the conversation and they don't view it as a real lead because they're already engaged with a competitor and are using us for a price comparison. And we think, wait a minute, this is the perfect person. They know your product. They have a need for it. They're engaged with the conversation and are ready to buy. And if you don't have differentiation to stand on, that you can't disrupt the buying process to go, wait a minute, we built this for someone specifically like you. We think you would have better value from our product because we built it for you than our competitor is. And you can't articulate it. That's the foundational problem that most organizations are facing. And so we started to go through, what does customer journey look like? How do we remove the word leads from it? And this was really just debt, sins that Salesforce had imposed on every organization, hot lead, cold lead, this fuzzy sort of spectrum. And we wanted to put real teeth to the quantitative and qualitative factors that determine whether someone is a marketing qualified lead or a sales accepted lead or a sales qualified lead. And we had very specific definitions that we wanted the organization to adopt. We'd even change those terms if they had been previously using a tool that had meshed all of those into a confusing mess. And so what we tried to do was to actually create a unique customer journey map into that organization that made sense, whether that was a handoff or whether that was situational awareness of where somebody was at in a buyer's journey, because we understood that buyer's journey wasn't just a linear one-way process. People bounced back and forth between buyer readiness, between evaluation of what solution they wanted to pick, between how much they were willing to pay for it. Any of us that have ever gone through a home remodel or buying a car or any sort of bigger considered purchase has gone through this buying process where you're bouncing back and forth 10 different ways on, should I do this thing? No, let's go bigger. If we're ripping out this wall, let's rip out all the walls. If we're remodeling the kitchen, we might as well do all the downstairs bathrooms and redo all the flooring. And then you go, that's way too expensive. Let's just go back to refreshing the current kitchen that we have. And so we ignore that buyer behavior in many of our sales methodologies and just assume that they're going down this path. We close the door and the sales submarine of we've evaluated pain and now we evaluated price and now we evaluated who the decision makers are. And we realized that was such an outdated sales model. And so we wrote out a better process for customer journey mapping. And we built this model that we help people understand a very complex buying process. The models aren't always accurate, right? But it does allow us to build a system around customer journey where we can tie specific tactics to every customer journey stage, and we can now evaluate the ROI, the effectiveness of any marketing tactic because we've tied it to a specific outcome. And so that's one of the lean marketing principles that we get into is how we teach people how to work so that they can properly evaluate and assign return on investment or assign effectiveness, assign a score, an outcome to any marketing tactic. Oftentimes we do marketing tactics like brand advertising. And what we really mean by that is not brand advertising. Brand advertising is a very specific discipline where you can measure the value of the brand equity on the balance sheet. And most organizations don't have the discipline, don't have the resources for that sort of thing. And so they use big enterprise level marketing tactics and terms in a way that they don't understand. And so brand advertising is often code word in small businesses for, I have no idea how to measure if this is going to work or not, but it should impact something. And we would say, no, you shouldn't be doing those sorts of activities unless you have a clear outcome that you're tying that activity towards. It could be brand recognition or brand authority or market reach, but you should have a specific way of measuring that. Don't just throw money into the wind. The final sprint here, we've gone through discovery, which is really about brand positioning. We've gone through validation, which is really about marketing analysis. Where do I sit and how am I unique to build? How do I understand how to tie all of these tactics to specific measurable outcomes in the organization? To this fourth final sprint, which is execution. And we realize that we have to teach organizations how to build a disciplined execution model. We have to instill, oftentimes they would, in the early stages of this, we had 3 sprints, not 4. And we realized that we needed to walk with our organizations so that they could implement and run this internally. For the organizations that stuck with us, we did it for them. They didn't need as much of the heavy lifting on the teaching, the execution discipline part. We really leaned into that. The execution phase is understanding how to do tactical planning, how to build learning loops, how to build good briefs, how to learn faster, planning for outcomes that fail. Most organizations just want everything to be a home run because they haven't thought through the discipline model of how to learn faster. And this is where lean comes in. What I set out to do was to build a framework that actually brought more value. This was the idea of stripping out waste. When most people use the word lean, they think small. That is not what lean marketing means. In this trademark process, we had to work really hard to prove that this wasn't just a merely descriptive model, that lean marketing framework didn't just mean a small marketing framework or an efficient marketing framework. What it meant was something very specific. And what that very specific thing means is that we borrowed, this goes back to lean manufacturing, and in the 90s, I believe, Eric Ries wrote a really phenomenal book called The Lean Startup. And it really spoke to the Silicon Valley startup where they applied these manufacturing principles that Toyota had generated in the 80s, 70s, 80s. America was shocked that in Japan, they could manufacture a car that had better quality to it, lower defect rates, pay to have it shipped across the world on a container ship, deliver in the United States, and still be cheaper than what we were manufacturing in the United States. They sent a team of researchers over, management experts from Harvard, and sent them over to Toyota and to learn, how are they doing this? How are they beating us? And so that became the foundation of these lean manufacturing principles. And so Eric Ries applied these to startups. How do we learn faster? And I was shocked that no one had really spent the discipline to apply these same sorts of principles to the marketing process. And so this was our attempt to think through all of those manufacturing principles and Japanese sort of efficiency principles of eliminating waste, of sorting. How do we actually do this? And a lot of those manufacturing principles, it's great books called The Goal and Lean Startup, all these sorts of books we took through and meshed and built our own system out of this. And it was intended to make sure that it fit in with anybody's operating system, whether that was OKRs or EOS or scaling up or MAP. We had built a marketing system that slotted into each of those, that provided clarity to the organization on how do we grow. This was, are we measuring the right things? Do we have the right sort of scorecard? What are the KPIs that go into that? And we have discipline around each of those. This final execution model was a mix of making sure we have the right scorecard, putting this together. This is actually in a software platform now that we built out. For anybody that's interested in that, we rolled that out in Notion. You can copy and use that as a template. It's part of our coaching programs. And so this was really the idea of how do we bring this out to market significantly faster. As you're approaching the new year and you're walking through your own planning framework, how do we grow? If you don't have clarity around what is our cost of growth, if we say we want to grow out 30% next year, do we have an understanding of what that growth costs us? Do we have an understanding of what our sales cycle length is? How have we been able to achieve this so far? Do we have an understanding of the various champion tactics, the things that we're doing on a repeat basis every day? Is it worth the investment? Should we be experimenting with other things? One of the lean marketing principles that we really lean hard into in the lean marketing framework is that we should have the ability to say no backed by data. That is one of the goals of the lean marketing framework, is the power to say no. How do I eliminate the things that I'm doing that are not working because I can now measure them and show that they're not working? And so the biggest waste we have is to continue to do the things that everybody else tells us to do without us having the hardline piece of saying, no, we're going to stop doing these activities and we're going to pocket that time and resource as profit. If you want to learn more about the lean marketing framework, if you have some of these elements and you want to dial them in further, you maybe done some of these and you didn't really get the value of what a market analysis could look like, or I have a 50-page marketing plan sitting on my desk from a higher ed institution, and all of it is the textbook sort of answers, but it provides no clarity to the organization on what they should do next. I can help you put some teeth to that by just reframing what you were looking for in that market analysis and giving you better data and insight. Hopefully this is helpful for you as you start thinking through your marketing planning. Think first about the lean marketing framework and those elements and why they're really important. And if you're missing that, I don't want your marketing plan to be a really inefficient budgeting exercise. I want it to have the teeth, the clarity, the perspective on how to grow and how to achieve the growth goals that the organization is looking for.